Okay.
Okay, some previous testimony there in the Jeffrey Willis case out of Michigan, the man facing his second murder trial, this one related to the death of a gas station attendant named Jessica Herringa. Richard Tendler is an attorney in Florida. He's joining us by Skype right now here on the Law and Crime Network. Hey, Richard, it's good to see you again.
Hey, nice to be here, Aaron. Nice to see you.
Okay, so we're talking about the Jeffrey Willis 2.0 here. In other words, this is the second trial that this individual is facing. A lot of the evidence against him is tenuous. We had a bunch of DNA evidence up earlier here before this mid-afternoon break, and a lot of it came back inconclusive. There was some blood on a gun. A lot of the DNA was inconclusive. And look, prosecutors have pretty much demonized this guy. And look, he sounds like a bad dude, okay? He's got all of this stuff that he's put together, names of victims in a computer. Just some sick, twisted stuff going on in this case, and we saw that with the sexual tools and toys that came out on the witness stand earlier from the investigators. But look, does it directly tie him into the death of this young woman named Jessica Herringa? You're shaking your head, and another piece to throw in this is Jessica's own mother has been pretty vocal that she doesn't like this prosecution. She's not even sure that her daughter is necessarily dead because, look, the reason we got into this prosecution is because this defendant's cousin, who wouldn't testify in the last trial, basically said, hey, I helped Jeffrey Willis, this defendant, hide the body, but then his story didn't check out and they've never found a body. And we're looking at some of the mother's posts on social media on the screen right now. Richard, what do you make of this?
Well, a lot there, Aaron, and this is one of these cases that drives me crazy as a defense attorney because 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having this trial. You wouldn't have all of this evidence that is, quote, inextricably intertwined, prior bad act evidence that occurred in another crime that they're going to use in this crime. So it drives me up a wall. It's been the case law that has been established that, hey, look, there's a common scheme and plan here. Also, it's all inextricably intertwined. In order to understand what he's charged with here, you have to understand what happened in this other matter. So, and courts have said it's okay to do that. And they basically made it much easier for prosecutors to prove cases. I don't think, 15, 20 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So it drives me crazy as a defense attorney. In this case, a lot has come in that I don't think should have come in. And then the issue is, well, will there be an appeal? And look, appeals are great, and they give the defendant another shot. However, in this case, I don't see any appellate court going out on a limb and wanting to send this case back. The court's going to know that he's got a million other cases. He's already doing a life sentence on another one. So, I don't see any appellate court. I don't see any court helping this guy out at all. It was the trial judge's job to keep this as sane as possible, and it's not. This is a free-for-all, I think. And those are kind of strong words from me, but yeah, absolutely. Now, the mother talking to, now making this, I think if I'm the defense attorney, at the minimum, I'm sending an investigator out there to speak with her and to see whether there's something else behind that, whether she has any other evidence that perhaps, she knows that the police didn't follow up on. Bringing her into court, maybe, hey, that may be the only recourse available for this defendant. Everything else has come in, so you might as well take a shot. Now, you got a skilled prosecutor here who's going to basically tell the mom, hey, look, you love your daughter, don't you? And I think if the prosecutor just sticks to that, I think jurors are going to realize this is just a mom holding out some hope for the worst possible case scenario that her daughter's gone.
Yeah, you know, I have to wonder the same thing, but I also have to agree with your thoughts on, you know, death by 1,000 cuts here. You know, when you say, look, this guy's a bad dude. I believe this teenager who gets up on the stand in both trials and says, this is the guy who tried to pull me in this van, had this gun, threatened to use the gun on me, that the gun basically jammed. If it hadn't jammed, I would have been probably dead. And she goes to this house of a stranger, just the closest place she could find safety, and she's cowering in a room, just terrified. And we heard the 911 call, and you can hear the terror in that kidnapping victim's voice. And look, I believe her story. I think that this guy did it. And you know, does that necessarily mean that he also did this? And the answer logically is no. So, you know, is the cousin going to testify in this case? Is he going to back out of it and plead the fifth? A lot of moving parts in it. And as you pointed out, Richard, a lot of states and a lot of judges are very careful about throwing everything into the sink at once in these cases. But that line has moved ever more towards the direction of more and more of this type of evidence coming in, just throwing everything in the sink and hoping that the jury just sees that the defendant is some kind of a bad character, despite the ban on bad character evidence, and is more likely to convict. And that was kind of a concern in the first case, even more of a concern in this one because of the Rebecca Bletch case. It was sort of a somewhat similar modus operandi with grabbing someone off the side of the road as to what the teenager testified for. Here, this is a different scenario. This is somebody who's at work in a gas station. I'm not quite sure if the logical link is as sound, other than you've got this witness that we just heard from in a replay clip, and her companion that we heard from yesterday afternoon, who says, okay, look, around the time that Jessica Herringa disappeared, this van was seen driving away from the facility on this sort of back service road in an hour when people aren't normally on that back alleyway service road, and that the van kind of sort of looks like the defendant's van.
No doubt. And that's the danger of it, is that there's nothing really, it's all so circumstantial and, you know, to an extent very far-fetched. But I understand the prosecutor's point that you need it in order to tell the story of how everything got started and how this has progressed. But again, the criminal defense lawyer in me, a lot of your audience members don't have that perspective, and I'm probably not going to make too many friends here today. But, you know, we're all in favor of putting away the bad guys, but we're not in favor of having the system like they got down in Cuba. And unfortunately, this is the way that it's gone. You know, I'm here in Florida, and it's the same thing down here, where you can bring in all of these other acts, and you know, it lowers the burden of proof, lowers the burden that prosecutor had to have in order to get that conviction.
Yeah, look, I'm really curious to see exactly how things go, but it looks like we've got the witness back on the stand again. This is the same witness who was there right before they went on a break. So, Richard, we'll be back with you in a bit, but first, let's head right straight back live to the Jeffrey Willis case in Michigan. End of the day in the Jeffrey Willis case in Michigan. Richard Tendler is here wrapping things up for us. Richard, we had all this DNA evidence on the stand today. I really didn't hear anything conclusive that points the finger at this defendant based on the case we're in right now, the Jessica Herringa case. We heard a lot about Rebecca Bletch DNA being on some of the objects, but we didn't hear a lot about Jessica Herringa.
A lot of nothing, Aaron. A lot of noise is what that was. You know, I think sometimes, you know, prosecutors put the evidence on so that the defense attorney can't get up there and say, hey, you didn't even have the stuff tested. You don't know whose DNA could have been on there. And maybe they're just showing that and they're taking that argument away. However, you know, I think a lot of it was just, let's get these sex toys out there and let's just color this as much as possible. Well,
look, I mean, we've got less than a minute left here, but I think that the defense could have used that and said, okay, you didn't find one drop of conclusive DNA from this victim on any of these things? That should have been the first question out of the gate.
That's a great point, Aaron. I think he touched on it one time without any force whatsoever, as you just said. I would have blown it out of the park, and I would have said nothing here tying my client to this.
Yeah, exactly. We've got just a couple seconds left. So Richard Tendler from Florida, great to have you back on Law and Crime. We'll see you again next time. Our coverage of the Jeffrey Willis case in Michigan will pick up tomorrow at about 9:30 when they usually kick off in court. A reminder, as usual, that we're live from at least 9 a.m. until at least 5 p.m. here on the Law and Crime Network with live coverage of trials and hearings across the country. For now, this is Aaron Keller, and for everybody here at Law and Crime, have a good evening.